He doesn't say, God put you there for this reason. He says it might be. And the point to that is she's supposed to be following the Lord no matter what. Hey, welcome to Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter, and I am bringing you the Bible in 365 days. So I am reading the Bible every day, and I am coming and sharing my thoughts with you on camera. So what I would like for you to do is, if you have never been here before, I want you to listen as much as you want to, and then I want you to go back to the beginning or go and read and then come back and join me. So I am using the chronological Bible reading plan, which is available online at oneyearbibleonline.com. They have a whole bunch of reading plans. You would look for chronological, download that, print it up, and then read it along with your Bible. So you might be in several books. Like today, we're going to be in a few different books. Today's reading is day 248. It is September 14th, and our reading is Ezra 6:14 through 22, Ezra 4:6, and then Esther 1-4. And so I was thinking today, before I did my reading today, I was thinking to myself, we have been in so much prophecy, and it's just been really difficult prophecy, things that we can't necessarily fully explain, things that we're not too sure if they have come true. Did they come true? How did they come true, right? We haven't seen any of that yet. So they're in the midst of this prophecy of future events that we don't really know how they're connected at this point. So it's difficult. The pictures that God is giving the prophets are descriptive and yet stuff that we wouldn't understand. I say all that because I thought to myself today, I can't do another day of prophecy. It's just been, there comes a time where it's like, oh my goodness, enough is enough. And I know that we have still about 10 or 11 days left, because we have 10 or 11 days left until we go into the New Testament. And it's really all prophecy until we go into the New Testament. Then I open up my Bible and I see it's the book of Esther. And I was so excited because I was just I couldn't do one more day of prophecy. Although we have to go back to it in a couple of days. But we're in the book of Esther, which is more of a true story, less of a prophecy. And so we don't really have to over-define things. We don't have to try and understand necessarily what they're saying. Although I think there are some interesting tidbits in there. So we're going to start with Ezra, but very briefly, I'm shooting for 1 minute history today. We are in the early 500s to late 400s. The nation of Israel had split, had been taken over by Assyria and Babylon. They were no longer a nation of their own. They were taken into Babylon and spread really throughout that entire area. They kind of spread out all into the countries, all over the Middle East, into some European nations, things like that. So they were no longer in Israel. And then after 70 years, because God poured out his wrath on them because they were not following him. And after 70 years, the Lord brought them back. And when he brought them back, he said, I want you to build my temple. So you saw what your ancestors did. Your ancestors turned away from me, turned away from me, turned away from me. And so I poured my wrath out on them. And now I want you to follow me. Do not be like your ancestors. I feel like this is sort of the perpetual discussion that God is having with us. Are we ever going to hear him? Do not be like your ancestors. Follow me, listen to me, adhere to my decrees, follow my commands. And they did. So in the beginning, they didn't. They built the foundation, but they wouldn't build anything else. And then they started building up the temple. And that's kind of where we're right in the middle of where they build the temple. At this time, there are some people in Israel, and there are still some scattered throughout the rest of the nations. So there's a portion in Israel because King Cyrus, the king of Babylon, sent them there. But portions of them are still spread out all over. And so we're going to do a little bit in Ezra, but there's also going to be in Esther. We're going to see these are the people that are still spread out all over. So let's start in Ezra. And we're starting in Ezra 6. This is the temple's dedication. So we find, pardon me for the shaking, I put my hand down. But we find that we are coming to the end of when they built the temple. It says in verse 16, it says, they finished building the temple according to the command of God of Israel. So God gave this command, build my temple. And the decrees or the rules, right, of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, kings of Persia. So they're kings of Persia, but remember they took over the nation of Babylon. So they're all in that area of Persia, but they took over. And so there's like sort of different kings taking over and kind of ruling areas. The temple was completed on the third day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Because King Darius, if you guys remember, was the one who said, yes, they need to keep working on their thing. I know, and I'm telling you, give them all the money they want, give them the sacrifices they want. So then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles, they celebrated the dedication. They brought a sin offering. They installed the priests in the divisions and the Levites in their group. So once again, if you were with me, I know I'm a broken record with if you were with me. If you weren't, please go back. But if you were with me, we saw this in multiple different generations. Everybody comes back. The Lord reconsecrates the temple, right? He brings himself and he kind of meets with all of them. The Levites go back in, the musicians go back in, right? Everything kind of like, I don't want to say restarts because it's different a little bit each time, but in essence, it's sort of like restarting, bringing all the nations together, which is exactly what the Lord wanted to do. So it says on the 14th day of the month, the exiles celebrated. So they're not exiles anymore. They're back in there, but they're still called the exiles. The exiles celebrated the Passover. They haven't been here that long, just a few years. And so they're celebrating the Passover in the temple. The Passover is a celebration of when Moses, through God, or God through Moses, saved the people of Israel and brought that entire people group out of slavery, out of bondage, and brought them into the land of Canaan, the land of milk and honey. And what they did is they killed all the firstborn. It was one of the miracles that the Lord did of all the Egyptians, because the Egyptians wouldn't let the people go. They wouldn't let the Israelites go. So the Lord took matters into his own hands. He killed all the Egyptians, but the blood of a lamb was put over the top of the door in order to pass over that door. And so every year they're supposed to celebrate how the Lord passed over their firstborn and then killed the firstborn of the Egyptians in order to give them freedom. This is a celebration that the Lord was with them as a people group. And now they've been 70 years gone and they're back in the temple. They're back in relationship with the Lord. And now they're celebrating how God saved them in the Passover. So this is a huge, big deal. He says, so the Israelites who had returned from the exile ate it together with all who had separated themselves from the unclean practices of their Gentile neighbors. So some of the exiles came back, and some people, they were living out and amongst all these other people. And they were, all the Gentiles were all doing all the things that they normally do, right? Going to their gods and doing their things with their gods. And so the people had to separate from that. No longer am I going to do those things with what the Gentiles do. I'm going to be separated from that, and I'm going to worship the Lord and the Lord only. And then it says, for 7 days, they celebrated with joy the festival of unleavened bread, because the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria, who was Cyrus, who let them go. 7 days is a key. We have used 7 days. Obviously, 7 days isn't a week. The Lord took 7 days to create the world, right? So we've seen 7 as one of those numbers, and I'm bringing it up because we're going to see it in Esther. So we've used 7 as one of those numbers over and over and over again. It's a number, many would say it's a number of completion. Whatever we're going to say it is the number that the Lord brings up over and over and over again. It's special. So we're going to note that festival lasted 7 days. It was a 7-day festival, which is always what it was in the past as well. So then we move on to Ezra 4:6, and it says, at the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, and we're getting this information, which I love that the person who put this book together chronologically was able to break it up into these tiny pieces. At the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, which is Artaxerxes, which was one of the kings of Persia, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. So somebody lodged a complaint against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. This is noted in the book of Ezra. So Ezra is someone who was living in Jerusalem, right? He's one of the exiles that came back. And so he notes that there was something against them, right? At the time of Xerxes. Now we're going to move into the story of what someone lodged, probably, right? Likely the someone that lodged a complaint against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. All right, so here we go. We're going to the book of Esther. Now, I'm going to read this book. Well, these pieces that I read. I have done this study before. I actually led this study, and I was really excited because I think it's got so much great information in there. And we really tore it up, right? We verse by verse each week, we were kind of asking questions and really diving into some of the meanings of some of those things. And I'm giving a high overview today. But I had said a lot of things that I may or may not agree with at this moment. And I think sometimes, because my intention this year in reading it, I've grown a lot. I'm breaking things up because total ADD. I've grown a lot in the past couple of years. We have been without a church home, and so we've been doing a lot of study on our own, and listening to things as well, but doing a lot of study on our own, like really just digging in the Bible and being with the Lord in prayer, trying to really understand what the Lord is trying to say to us as people, right? And so I say that because there were things that I thought, and I was kind of putting emotions in it now, and I still do that. I want to be realistic, but now my goal in reading those things is to not put anything in there like, oh, I know this, therefore it has to be that. Oh, this must be true, therefore it has to be that, right? I want to take some history and I want to understand some historical context, but I don't want to go too far into some of the weeds of what other people say, what people are like, it clearly says this, right? Because that's not always true. And I think we need to be careful about some of those things. And so I say this because some of the ways in which King Xerxes treated Queen Vashti, I was like, ugh. Now I'm sort of like, maybe that was okay. And so bear with me while I say that, where my thoughts are going. I always say this, and I want to be clear that I'm going to say it again. This is how God is revealing it to me. This is not the be all end all. The beauty of these stories and the beauty of the Bible is today I see these small little things, and next year when I read it, I might see some different small things depending on where I am. The story hasn't changed. God hasn't changed, but sometimes he shows you something in there that's needed at that moment, right? And sometimes you don't get it the first time, you don't get it the second time, or you get a little piece and then you get a little bit deeper next time and you get a little bit deeper next time. This time I am noticing how this story, because everyone goes, why is Esther even in there? It doesn't even make any sense. Actually, to the point where there are other Bibles that add some extra things in there that talk more about God, because we don't really see a lot of God talk in here. And so everyone's like, why is it in there? To me, I'm linking it up that it looks like the pattern that God has actually presented to us thus far in the story. And so I'm thinking it makes complete sense for it to be in here. So let's read through and let's try and get a basic overview. We don't have the whole story today. We only have the first half, but I'm thinking it gives us enough. So here's where we go. Esther 1, it starts. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. So again, this is the time of Xerxes, 480s, 4 to 460s. Remember, we're going down in time because it's BC. So this is all like in the late 400s BC. He ruled all these provinces. So most people have heard of Xerxes, Artaxerxes. If you've seen the movie 300, you've heard of Xerxes, right? So he's the king at the time. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal house in the citadel of Susa. Susa, geographically, is like in the Babylon area. It's not in the Israel area. So we're going to find that there are Jewish people living in this area, but they're living outside of the nation of Israel, right? So they're the ones who have chosen not to go and live. And I'm not saying right or wrong. It didn't seem to be, the king didn't say every Israelite must go back to Israel, right? He offered it to them to go. Some went and some stayed for whatever reason they chose, right? And again, with the Lord, not with the Lord, whatever that might be. Following the Lord, not following the Lord. Some did, some did not. So this family looks like they chose to stay in Babylon while other families chose to go and live in the land of Israel. So it says, so that's where he was living in Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all of his nobles and officials. He gave this banquet for 6 months. So this was a massive banquet. And he gave it to everyone in his citadel. So it was like, he gave it to everyone in like all of like the military, the princes, all these leaders and everything like that. Like everyone that did any kind of ruling or leadership or anything in his kingdom. So 6 months he had people in there, and he was offering wine and food, and like he was showing everybody how much stuff he had. Like, look how amazing this is. One of the things that they say about him is it says wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant. So he was abundantly giving wine. in keeping with the king's liberality. He's giving liberally. So he's offering his stuff. He's showing everybody around, right? He's giving liberally. That's the way I'm reading it. Sort of like he's a giver of things. And I feel like it makes sense. He's got all these people here and he's spending all his money and showing them food, and he's showing them all those places, and he's feeding them, and he's partying with them, and he's doing all these things. Now, maybe not the best that he's partying with them, but that might be their lifestyle, right? They're not Israelites. So it says, so after he gave this huge giant party, he then gave a party for people. And now this is just all the people in the citadel. So first he's giving to all the princes and all the top leaders and everything. And then he gives the second party, and it's smaller and it's shorter. And he's giving that to everyone in the citadel. The citadel, because then Queen Vashti gives one in the palace. Which is just kind of where they live. It's like lush and beautiful, and right. This is where the queen kind of has all of her dwellings and all of her things. And she gives this party for all of her women that live in the palace. He gives a party for everyone. I'm assuming it's the men, but he says everyone, only because she's just women. Everyone in the citadel. The citadel is the palace would be in there, but it's bigger. And it's got like fortified walls all around it, right? It's like the place that they're protected from in time of war. So a citadel is kind of an important thing where all like the people that would be protecting the king would be living. And so he has all of them come and party with him for a week. And then it says, he served every man what he wished. So again, I feel like that means he's pretty open with his stuff. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. Okay. So on the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, we're starting to see some of these sevens again. So there's definitely a meaning behind it. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into that weeds, but there's definitely some meaning behind. There's 7 eunuchs, there's 7 days, there's 7, right? Like there's 7 princes, I think, that he talks to, 7 friends that he talks to about certain things. And so there's an importance to that. So he says, he sent these eunuchs to go find Vashti, his wife, Queen Vashti, and he says, put the crown on her head and bring her to me because I want to display her beauty. Now, some have said, kind of in my studying, when I did my study a while ago, some have said he brings her there with only the crown, right? Like his goal, well, he doesn't bring her, but Kisha says no. But his goal is to bring her there with only the crown. So he's kind of like showing her off. And maybe in a way that's distasteful. We actually don't know that for sure. That might be historically true. But what we do know, so taking it from my perspective now, this perspective that I'm coming to, what we do know is he is sovereign over the land, right? So he is the king. He is the king of all this land. He is sovereign over the land. He makes a decree, and those who are with him are supposed to follow that decree. So he says, go get my wife and tell her to come here. And she says, no, she chooses not to come. So he's upset for obvious reasons. The reason I'm saying I changed my mind on this is because I used to really think like, oh, sorry, there's a little net. I used to think like, how dare he? And there can be some truth to that. A little bit of like, how dare he? But he's the king. And you may not always like what the king asks, but he's the king. And so we don't see anything else about Vashti. We never hear really anything about her. We don't hear that she was a good wife. We don't hear that she did, right? All we know from her right now is that she said no, that she wasn't going to be coming. She refused. So it said, since it was customary for the king to consult experts in the matters of law and justice. So he was consulting these people very specifically about law, like the order that was passed down, and justice, the difference between right and wrong, right, in these areas. He spoke with people who understood the times. So people in that area. Again, I want to be clear that we are not judging these people as we would Israelites. Because I kept thinking in my head, well, he wasn't going to God. Well, of course he's not going to God. Because the Lord isn't his God, right? He's not following the Lord. So the things that he might be asking from her might not be good according to the Lord, right? But according to their laws in Babylon or in Persia, right? That might be a whole different story. And so he says he goes to 7 nobles, and they say, according to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? She's not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. And then these guys reply, Queen Vashti has done wrong. not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and all the peoples and all the provinces of King Xerxes. So they're saying, again, I want to note right, wrong, indifferent. His advisors, whom he goes to about the law and justice, are saying she did wrong, not just to you, but to all of the people. So hear why she's doing wrong to all the people. The queen's conduct is going to be known to all women. And then once it's known to all women, they're all going to despise their husbands. How are we going to live in a society where, and they live in a society where the men are making the rules and the women are following? So we might, as women, we might be like, listen, I'm not following any of the, I'm my own person. I make my own money. I do my own thing. And I'm not going to do what he asks me to do. How dare he call me and tell me to do these things? That's talking from our perspective in our time period right now. And that's losing perspective over what was at that time. And that's why kind of I'm fighting a little bit of what I used to say, because I would agree that this is pretty reprehensible on his part. He was drunk. He wanted to show her off. She might not have had anything on but the crown. How dare he? It was the wrong thing to do, right? Like all of these things. And now I'm sort of thinking he's the king. She's the follower. And now because so she's under him, right? He's on top. She's under him. She's the queen. That's the way it rolls, right? She's under him. She's the queen. And because she disrespected him, she, as a leader for the rest of the people, is now showing the people it's okay to disrespect the king, right? Do you see, like let's just say, for example, visually, she's a shepherd. And now she's a shepherd that's not following her sovereign king. And this shepherd's not following the sovereign king. And it's telling all the people, you know what? You don't need to follow the sovereign king. And so that's bad. That's not good in the order of the kingdom, the way that the order should be working. This is disordered. Okay, so what are we going to do with her? It says that she wouldn't come. So it says there's going to be no end of disrespect and discord. So listen, let's do this. Vashti's never going to come in and see King Xerxes again. So he has all the power to have people come in and go as they please, right? You can come to me, you cannot come to me. It's all my power. I ask for you. If you come to me when I ask for you, I may or may not see you, right? And you may die because of it, because you're not supposed to come to me. So he has all this power. So he says she is no longer allowed to come see you, right? And on top of that, we got to let the entire nation know about this, right? So he says, also let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. She disrespected. You want someone in there that's not going to disrespect your sovereign kingship, that's going to love and honor you as the king that you are. And so he says the kings and the nobles were pleased with this advice. So the king did as he proposed. He sent dispatches all over. So he sent out letters to everybody. And essentially they were saying what happened, right? They were letting them know that this is what happened to Queen Vashti. So he was laying down the law and he was letting them know he poured out his punishment on Queen Vashti. She didn't do what she was supposed to do. He poured out his punishment on her, right? And she is no longer allowed in the presence of the king. It doesn't say she died. It just says she's no longer allowed in the presence of the king. So it says later when Xerxes' fury had subsided, so now his wrath was poured out, his fury had subsided. I hope you see where I'm going with this. His wrath had poured out, his fury had subsided. He remembered her. So he doesn't forget her. He doesn't say she doesn't exist. He doesn't say she's dead to me. He does remember her and what she had done and what he decreed about her. Then they propose, listen, let's go. Now his attendants are like, okay, let's go find somebody new. This is who he finds. Let's search for a young, beautiful virgin. So someone that is clean. That is what he is searching for now. Untouched, unspoiled, clean, young. I want you to take out of your mind right now some of like the current day stuff, right? Like, ew, he's so gross, right? He's an old man. He's a king. Yucky, yucky. I'm with you on that. We got to think about big picture and what was happening in the time of the late 400s, right? This is 400 and something BC. This is not 2024. So think of like kind of thinking outside of yourself a little bit. He said, so they're going to have him come in, let these people be placed under the care of Haggai, this eunuch. And he says, he's going to give them beauty treatments. So you're finding all these young, beautiful virgins, right? You're bringing these girls in, and then you're going to give them beauty treatments for a long time. So you're going to what? You're going to clean them. before they come in front of the king. There's going to be some cleaning. There's going to be a middleman that comes in, cleans these girls before they come to the king. So now we're going to meet Esther. There was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the name of Mordecai. He's from the tribe of Benjamin, and it says he's the son of Kish. If you guys remember who Kish was the father, because obviously it says son, but it really means, right, like grandson, whatever. Kish is the father of King Saul. So this guy is a descendant of King Saul. So he has an important bloodline. Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, right? He'd been carried into exile way back in the beginning, and he has a cousin named Hadassah. It is his uncle's daughter, I think is what he says it is. And he winds up taking care of her because her parents aren't there anymore. She was beautiful. She's one of the women that was picked to go into the kingdom, right? Her name was Hadassah. That was her Hebrew name, and she also had the name Esther, so she actually had dual names. It said, she pleased him. Esther was also taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him. So she pleased the eunuch, and she won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. So if we see this, right, she pleased him, and then he gave her all of these things. She pleased him just by sort of being who she was. She was a lovely young woman. It said he assigned her 7, here we go, 7 again, 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace. She didn't reveal her nationality. So this is kind of going off the mark a little bit. So she never told him who she was. She was Jewish. She was Israelite, obviously. And so she never shared that with them because there was still strain between them. There wasn't like, it wasn't that everyone was so thrilled with the Jewish people being in town. They were very different from everybody else. They followed a different God. They ate different food. They did different things, right? They followed different rules. And so it wasn't like they weren't in harmony with each other. And so she didn't share. Mordecai had asked her, again, as her leader, as the guy in charge of her, he had asked her not to share her background. And so she didn't. And then it said anything she wanted was given to her. She was taken from there was this deal now. So now he's kind of like Xerxes was going to pick the queen. And so what he would do is he would invite one of the girls in, and he would look at her, speak with her, whatever it was, and then he would send her away. And then a different night, he would ask another girl, right? And so if you were lucky, you were brought back. Before they went, they were allowed to bring anything with them from the harem. And so Esther, you can just see some of the humility in Esther, right? Esther only brought what that Haggai guy, the eunuch, told her to bring. So she asked him, hey, what do you think I should bring with me? And then he told her, and then she did. So she was pleasing everybody left and right. Like she was humbly responding. She was lovingly giving, right? She was doing all these things. And then he wound up, King Xerxes wound up being really pleased with her and then brought her back. And then he put the crown on her head, right? She won the favor of everyone who saw her. So she was this like jewel inside the kingdom. She won the favor of everybody. Everybody loved her. And he said he put the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And then afterward, he gave a banquet called Esther's banquet. So again, we see that he's giving constantly, right? Like the king is still giving, and he's still doing all these things for the people. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the province and distributed gifts with royal liberality. So now we see this word again. He's giving. As much as I want to think badly of this king in this situation, in this time, it looked like he was being a good king. It says when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the gate. So Mordecai was there watching her. Now, I want to give you another visual because I already said it a little bit with Queen Vashti. He was there. He was at the gate like a shepherd. He was there watching and protecting her and making sure she was safe from outside the gate. He was doing what he could to protect her because he was her caregiver. He was essentially her father, her shepherd, her caregiver, her uncle. During that time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. There was a plot to kill the king. Mordecai found out about it. So these two guys were kind of talking over, they were whispering, and they were making a plot in order to kill the king. Mordecai heard it. He went to Esther. I think a big squirrel just jumped back there. He went to Esther, and he had Esther go to the king and tell the king everything. And she told him everything and said that it was Mordecai that did that. So he knew that it was her relative that brought, well, I don't know if he knew it was her relative, but he did know it was Mordecai that brought him the information. So she had shared that with him. And it was all recorded in the book in the presence of the king. So those, remember I was saying that with the chronicler, that they would write all these chronicles. And so this was a book that was written that was sort of chronicling the life of the kingdom. And this is one of the things that was written in there. Reminds me of the book that we heard about in Daniel and in Zechariah. All right, so it says, after these events, King Xerxes honored Haman. So here we have a new character. Haman was one of his generals, and so he honored him. And what he wound up doing is telling everybody around them to honor him by bowing to him and essentially worshiping him. And Mordecai couldn't do that because Mordecai could only bow to the Lord. And he offered, he said, I'm Jewish and I'm unable to do this, right? I can only bow to my Lord, so I can't bow to you. And he told him that. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel or pay him honor, he was enraged. So now we're starting to see, I want to say, the villain in the story. So Haman is a bit of a villain because Mordecai honored his God over top of him. Haman is now angry and he's enraged and he wants to do something about it. So he goes to the king and he says, there's this certain people. And he's like, they won't bow to me. So they only honor their king. They don't honor you. So he's like speaking in his ear. And he's like, they're not going to honor you. And he says, if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. I'll even offer all the money to get it done. So he's not just talking now. Like, he wasn't satisfied with it just being Mordecai. Now he's got to destroy this entire people group. So let's say he's an enemy of the Israelites coming in to conquer this people group. And he's like, let me get all of them and get rid of all of them because they're not going to honor you as a God that you deserve. So the king took his signet ring from his finger. So here we go, like the honor of the nation and the land. He's the sovereign king. And he gave it to Haman. And he said, keep the money, so don't do the money, and do with the people as you please. So he has now made the King Xerxes, because he doesn't fully understand, but he has now made a full decree, right? So now, according to the sovereign king with his ring, and we've seen this a couple other times where they make this decree, right? Like Daniel in the lion's den, right? Like the king was like, oh my gosh, I made this decree and I didn't realize that it was going to affect you. And now you have to go in the lion's den and now I'm going to pray to you, right? Like, it seems like it's sort of this kind of same situation. And the king makes this official decree and he says, use my signet ring, use the power of the kingship behind you, and go. Everyone on this one day can go and kill every Israelite, every Jewish person in the land. And that was the decree he made. And then after he made this decree, he says, so because it's in one single day, and it says, and it's issued as law. And then in verse 15, it says, couriers go out, and then the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. So people are like, what is happening? Now we come to sort of the end of this section. It says, when Mordecai learned about this, he tore his clothes. And so he started mourning, as he should be, right? So he started mourning. He realizes what's happening. Mourning, sackcloth. He's depressed. He's wailing at the gates. He's making a really big deal out of everything. Again, this is what he should be doing because he's mourning his people. He's mourning to the Lord about what is happening to his people. He's doing open mourning. And when Esther hears about it, she's like, hey, let me give you some clothes so you can go stop doing this. And he's like, no, I'm not going to stop wailing at the gate. It says, he instructs her to go into the king's presence. So once again, he's shepherding her, right? He's teaching her a thing to do. Go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with the king for your people. And then all the kings and all the princes and the royal provinces, she says, all the king's officials and the people know that if any man or woman comes there, like if he doesn't put out his, if he doesn't extend the gold scepter to me, I could die. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. So he's no longer calling her, and she's afraid that she's going to die if she goes to the king, right? So Mordecai, does he say, you know what? No problem. I understand. He doesn't. So when Mordecai found out what she said, that she said, I could die if I come there, he said, don't think that you can, don't think because you're in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. Because if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance is going to come. So he has full confidence that relief will come to the Jewish people. Maybe not these, right? But maybe not those in the house. But the Jewish people will not be annihilated. He said, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. So he's saying, this might be the reason that God has put you in this place. You might have a purpose, and this might be your purpose. what I want to note is he doesn't say, God put you there for this reason. He says it might be. And the point to that is she's supposed to be following the Lord no matter what. She's supposed to be honoring the Lord and the people of the Lord no matter what. She's supposed to put herself further down on the chain than the people of the Lord no matter what. And maybe, just maybe, this is why you're there. So that could be the reason. It says, then Esther sent this reply: go, gather everyone together, get everybody to fast. I'm going to get everybody fasting and in prayer. You get everybody fasting in prayer. And then I'm going to go and speak to them. And if I perish, I perish. So she has surrendered herself to the Lord. So we are going to see what happens tomorrow. If this has been a blessing to you, I want you to like, share, and subscribe. And I want you to keep reading, finish the book of Esther, and I will see you guys tomorrow.